Welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm Kathy, and this season is dedicated to exploring the unique world of raising boys. Parenting boys today can feel like trying to crack a complicated code, a mystery, especially when it comes to understanding their inner emotional world. Together, we'll dive into real life stories, share practical tips, and uncover insights to help you and your son thrive, not just survive. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's unlock the parenting code, one boy at a time. Welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. Today, I'm excited to welcome Gina Casazza. Gina is a multi-talented individual who has explored diverse career paths, from the film industry to stand-up comedy, children's book writing, and self-care entrepreneurship. Her journey is filled with unique and challenging experiences, including training with a Navy SEAL, intentional kidnapping, and a decade-long journey to regain her hearing after losing it at 21. She's also a certified Reiki practitioner and a stand-up comedian. She has written, directed, produced, edited, and starred in numerous short films of her own creation. She's also helping to raise her spirited 3-year-old nephew. Please join me in welcoming Gina.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I did find it quite fascinating learning a little bit more about you and kind of putting the puzzle pieces together from the brief conversation we had before deciding on this interview. And I will get into how this is all connecting with boys. I have questions about that as well. But what kept striking me is I kept going a little bit deeper and deeper and deeper, trying to understand who you were. Um, a lot of your characteristics or behaviors or patterns that you seem to fall into really are would be considered more masculine, like more tapping into your masculinity than your femininity, although there's balance to both. But it seems like it started at a very young age. Like I read in one of the places, like the first thing that I understood about a little bit more about you um, was I read that you changed your name when you were 12 years old
Yeah, yeah.
because you had always wanted to be different.
hmm
So before we start talking about masculinity and things connected with your experiences around that topic, tell me where this came from. Like, is this from your parenting, like, your parents raising you, your family environment, or how did you come to be the way you are?
I feel like we all come to be the way that we are with our environment, our family, where we go to school, all that plays a part of who we are, right? And it's like I'm born on Long Island, right? Chances are I'm not going to be Mormon. Whereas if I was born in Utah, it's just I would have a different upbringing, a different raising. I might have been different. If I had girls in my life, that I had sisters or something, I may have a different, more femininity growing up to me versus the boys that I was raised around. So I really think that the environment, the people that you're around, all the people that play a handle in raising you, the school that you go to. I went to public school, my brothers went to private school. All that plays a part in who you are, and I that's just how I feel, and all of that had a huge impact on the person that I am. And I think as you mentioned, I'm masculine. I play a lot into, well, I grew up with all boys. I mean, I was very much into, and I had a brother that was almost this, we were 13 months and 4 days apart. I have two brothers, but one is 7 years younger than me. But my other brother and I were super close, and we did everything together. And whatever he did, I wanted to do, and all this stuff. And then I had boy cousins. I think I had like six of them, all around the same age. And we all hung out all the time together. Some of us lived in the same town, some of us lived 10 minutes from each other. We saw each other frequently. So it's a very boy central, competition was high, things that females don't normally,
Yep.
little girls like I had because of that environment that I was raised in.
Well, it's funny because your experience, family dynamics, is exactly the opposite of how I grew up. And we had one, two, three, four, five girls, one boy, and he was right in the middle. And I really do think some of his most compassionate, you know, empathetic behaviors and everything came from that environment that, you know, is kind of, you're not going to get away with anything because you're a guy. You're going to do everything the same way that we do it. You know, you have the same responsibilities that we do. So it's interesting. I think you're very right. Environment and and the way you're parented. And sometimes I think with families that are larger, that parents just kind of they it's not crowd control like but when you've got six kids there's a certain amount of crowd control that goes into that. So I find today that children parents are having less children to begin with, and often the world evolves around myself included. Like we were blessed with one child, um, but like our world evolved around him. And you know, conversations, they were all he was the focus, he was the part of our world, whereas my parents were beautiful, loving, caring um parents that raised all of us with strong, you know, morals and high ethics. And but it wasn't the same. So definitely environment has a huge impact on how someone turns out. So
Yeah,
it
it
is
really it
interesting.
really does. Yeah. And it's funny though, because like if you would ask me like 3 years ago about, that child center of your world, I'd be like, because I don't have children, but then my nephew was born and he's the center of our world. I mean, everything revolves around him, like
Yeah.
everything. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, he's struggling to learn his ABCs. You know what? I'm going to make an animation for him to learn his ABCs to help him out. And then I have work to do. Yet I will spend the whole entire day to make an animation for him to help him learn his ABCs. And it's just so funny though, because again, like my whole entire world,
Yep.
revolves like with him. It's
Well,
yeah.
your priorities change. Like that's
It do.
that's
It
that's the
completely
fact of
changes.
it.
Yeah.
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 So, and that also puts more pressure, I think, on the adults in the children's world to be aware of the world that he's growing up in so that they can help him with the best tools, the best strategies, and how to, you know, experience life the best. So, yeah. So, what is your like how is your connection? Like how involved are you with your nephew's upbringing?
So he is in Los Angeles area. I'm in South Carolina, but I see him pretty frequently. They sometimes need us to come out, me and my mom, to help when his mom has business overseas sometimes, and then my
Mhm.
brother works. So, I'll go there with my mom to help take care of my nephew, bring him to school, things like that, while my brother goes to work and his mom does some business stuff. And then when I'm in town, like they're very like
Mm.
Gina's in town, and I'm like, I have plans with him. Can I take him here? They're very, very great with you know, yeah, of course, like take them.
Sharing
I don't
him.
like to overstep. They're the parents,
Yep.
when it comes to like, I'll ask, I'll be like, oh, can I do this? And
Yep.
they're really, really great. Like in terms of we have a lot of the same values and things,
Yeah.
which helps because it takes a village to raise children, and having those values and those core values really helps because it helps to instill in him, those messages that you really want for him to be a strong individual, to be someone
Yeah.
that has high self-esteem, to be someone that has compassion,
Yeah.
and it helps to have those strong role models that are in his life. I actually was supposed to be there for 2 weeks this week and last week, but I had some speaking events come up, so I wasn't able to. But I was with him for 6 weeks from December to January. And then
Mm.
I'll be there. And like I mean his parents are there, but
Yeah.
I was there for a while and then I'll be back and forth a couple of times throughout the year. I'm looking to go there like April. And when I'm there, I'm usually there for like 2 weeks at a time. So, and then when I'm not, we're on the phone FaceTiming and I'm doing videos for him. Like I said, the ABC thing I just did last week for him, and I did a spelling of his name in an animation form.
Cool.
So I, do my best to be extremely present in his life.
So, growing up with brothers must have given you some unique insights. So, how do you think that that environment shaped you in your understanding of boys and men and masculinity?
Speaking only from my
Yeah.
perspective,
Yeah.
I I really don't know what it's like to have sisters, like I
Mhm.
just and I can only say like from myself though growing up with brothers, it's a very competitive, like everything's a competition.
Mhm.
Everything's a competition, and it's very rough and tumble type of play, So and when it wasn't just me and my brothers, because like I said, my cousins were very like they were like their family, but they're over all the time. And we spent a lot of time together. Like I said, some of us lived in the same town, went to the same schools. So we saw each other frequently. We were on sports teams together. I played baseball for a short time with my brother and my cousin because I wanted to do what they did. I also felt like I wanted to be included, and being a different gender already put me at a disadvantage,
Mhm.
as opposed to understanding the boys and them because they're not emotional. They weren't, it was like, you know, someone pissed you off and it was just easy to just, to handle it versus and then it was just like it just went, to things didn't bother them like it bothered me. If someone said something to me, it would like really bother me. I'd sit with it, To them, it just like rolled off, no big deal. Or, they'd get into a little argument and then like in an hour it was gone. And for me, it would like linger.
That's a
But
really interesting thing because that is very female and it really we don't even recognize that difference. Like I'm all about understanding the differences and and respecting the differences. But I remember having an experience when we had just moved to Beirut, and I was standing in the evening after the meal. It's such a beautiful place and right on the Mediterranean. And I was looking out of our balcony, which was only on the second floor, so I could really see what was happening down in the alleyway between the two buildings. And there was two groups of boys, and one was they must have been I would say 10, 11, 12, 13, like in that age. And one group of boys had come up from the side street, and another group of boys was coming in from the other side. And there were obviously two leaders, and there was just some dynamics going on. And the two leaders, these boys, kind of faced off. And because they were speaking Arabic, I didn't understand what they were saying, but I certainly got the emotion that was coming from it. But they were right in each other's face, like right and shouting at each other, and like their chest was out, like they had all this. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to go down and get the concierge to go over because there's going to be a big problem. But I waited a few minutes to see, do I, as the adult, do I need to step in here, or is this just the way things happened here? And the interesting thing is something happened in whatever they were shouting back and forth, and they kind of both backed off a little bit. And within minutes, the two groups were together. The two main guys that were arguing the most were shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, walking down, going towards the sea. Like it was like, and I looked at it and I had the same thing. If that had been me, and I had had that issue that brought up that strong emotion, I wouldn't be talking to them for years, probably. Like it
Yeah.
just blew me away. But yeah, that's something and I don't often talk about that because I don't remember that is a characteristic that's very interesting. So because you were
Yeah. And
surrounded
they
by
look at me like
males,
my brothers are like they just, I mean, I'm very dramatic, which is kind of ironic considering I grew up with all boys. But it was funny though, because I feel like these qualities really came out more when I left my home
Mhm.
versus when I was growing up. Because when I was growing up, I like didn't really cry. I held things in because I'm surrounded by boys, and like that's the tough thing to do. You don't cry, you don't, like things like you act tougher than you are, like things like that. So I remember that, and I just remember like wanting to be strong and tough, and and all the qualities that I saw or I thought, like this was just what, they got. And then when I left home, I was be like figuring me out and things like that. And that was a really, really rough time for me. My 20s was like the worst time for me because I was an emotional wreck, super dramatic, like everything was like, communication was terrible. But I think it's also because like it was like the first time I'm on my own, and the thing was is that I was already emotional like as a child, but not like in terms of hormonal. Like women just have hormones that men don't understand. And we don't even understand it as women sometimes. We're like, what the heck? Because no one really teaches us. They just sometimes chalk it up like, oh, they're just on their period. They're just emotional. But like, what is that?
Yeah.
Why are we like, it's like saying like, oh, Mercury's in retrograde. It's like,
Hmm.
but what is that, right?
Yeah.
What is really going on, right? It's like, you're not really taught anything. It's like when you're emotional, it's like, well, she just has her period, just leave her alone, right? Versus how can she understand what's going on to like combat those emotions or to handle those emotions better, right? And we're not taught that. And boys and men, they can't understand it. They can't understand what we go through on an emotional level. And I grew up with a mom who was amazing and incredible, but didn't really teach me in terms of, the emotional. She lost her mom when she was 13. It's like during the most pivotal point in her life, she lost a mother, right? And then to be a mother to a daughter, she taught
Yeah.
me everything, but I really feel like the emotional regulation was always just like, she's just on her period. Let's just, leave her alone, right? And the boys, again, they can't really understand that. And with my brothers, I am like a talker. I'm like, hey, like, let's talk things out. They don't care. They don't care. Like, when I'm like, hey, this was really affecting me, let's talk this out. It's like, well, why is it still affect? That was yesterday's news. Like we forgot about it, and like
Mm.
it just sits with us until we need to like talk about it, and they're just like confused by
Get
this
over it.
conversation that we
Yeah.
want to have. And it's like and it's just it's an interesting dynamic. And the thing is like I feel like there is this I don't understand you type of thing in the gender space. And the thing is, I'm never going to understand them. They're never going to understand me, in a sense that you are not me. We are not the same. However, I will do my best to figure out how to communicate to understand your needs, even if I'm not going to understand you. Like, you're not going to know what it's like to have a period. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to know what it's like to have this hormonal imbalance and this emotional whatever is going on, right?
See,
But
part of me
yeah,
disagrees, not disagrees, but I think that women are really keen on that concept that we will never understand each other, and the man could never understand, about menstrual cycles, giving birth, and that. And there's some components of that that are, of course, they're true. You can't understand something you don't go through yourself as deeply as someone who's going through it. But in the same light, and definitely for myself, women have no idea what a male goes through with testosterone, like what his hormonal changes are
right.
like. And if you think nobody is talking about what women are going through, there are even less people even aware to have the conversation. What is happening to these boys when they get these hormonal surges, when their whole world kind of changes and no one's talking about it. So Yeah, I
Which
kind of
I totally, and that's what the thing is like I have no idea. First of all, I can't even understand myself, right? I'm figuring me out. At this point, I've gotten to a point where I understand it. I am able to control myself. I'm able to control my hormones. I'm able to control my emotions and understand what's going on in my life. Now, it took me a really, really long time to figure this out. And again, nobody's teaching that, right?
Mhm.
And if nobody's teaching that, how often are we talking about the males, right? It's
Yeah.
just it's non-existent, right?
So
And
I wonder if I
yeah,
can just, I don't want to lose this and it's easy. This conversation, there are so many things to talk about with you. But when you were saying that how difficult it was in the 20s for you, and I think that that is also a dramatically challenging time for males for many
100%.
reasons.
It's a
Many,
very dramatic. It's a hard time, I think, for everybody as you're coming into the adulthood.
yeah.
But I think for the males in general, it's like there's a lot of pressure on men, and it's that time where like, you know, men are well, they're becoming men, right? And they're also figuring out their life. And the thing is like you need to be a provider. That's what we're to men are the providers, right?
Mhm.
They're the protectors, right? So it's like that's a lot of pressure on a man. And then plus at the same time, it's like females are looking for a male, right? We're in that period of
Yeah.
dating and getting married and having children, and then you're also, but now there's this weird transition where people are waiting a bit longer
Hmm.
and they are like having their own careers and stuff, which makes things even more challenging for the male because they're how do you say this, like the pressure is even more challenging because they're now in a space where women are also breadwinners. They're also bringing. Go
No,
ahead. Did you want to say?
not
Yeah.
only breadwinners, in because since the probably the 70s, statistics have changed drastically, and they're not only women are becoming breadwinners, there's a higher proportion of women who go on to have advanced education than there are males. So they're getting jobs that have, decent salaries, and they're being, they're up there in the world, whereas the men, they're not getting higher degrees as much. They're not making a substantial increase. Like it's almost the same amount of salary if you convert it time-wise as they were making in the 70s. So what you have now is women whenever they decide, they're pursuing, a mate, basically. Usually they are established in their careers. They've got a good salary coming in, and they want somebody who is at a minimum the same level that they are.
Right. Yes.
And so you
Yeah.
have
That's
this
challenging. That's
disconnect that's
yes. Yes.
so I wanted to go back though, because when we were talking about the 20s, I just wonder, and I don't know, like you can tell me better, but I wonder if part of the struggle, like you say, everyone goes through challenges when they're 20s. I think it's a time that you reevaluate, where your life is going, and it's a challenging time. I wonder if some of the challenges that you faced were related to, your early experiences. Like perhaps if you had had all sisters, you would have been a little more expressive in your emotions. You would have followed some of those characteristics. Whereas when you leave the nest, you are you're usually in a culture that expects you to behave according to, whatever your gender is. And so the expectation is there, but you haven't been practicing that since you were young. So I wonder if that disconnect in your upbringing made it more challenging for you.
Could have. I mean, it's hard to say because I didn't experience, I
Mm.
don't know what it would have been like having sisters or, I did have cousins that were there were three girl cousins that were close in age. They were five years apart from me, 6 and 7 years apart from me, but they were like this trio.
Hmm.
And the thing was is that like they're close now and stuff, the three of them. They've always been close, like growing up and stuff like that, but very different, like fashion, getting their nails done, having makeup. Like to this day, I don't wear makeup. Like
Hmm.
I wore makeup a little bit in my 20s to experiment, but like, I mean, even wearing makeup, it's not like I couldn't wear makeup as a child.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that I thought about, like fashion didn't come until I was like 18. Like
Hmm.
wearing a dress did not come until like I didn't step into my femininity until later in life.
Yeah.
Like until I was around 18. Like before that, I was a very much quote unquote a tomboy.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
wore what my brothers wore. I wore some of his clothes, just because again, I wanted that connection that I wasn't getting,
Yeah.
because again, there is this disconnect. And also I wanted to be accepted in terms of, you know, the environment that I was in. And I remember like wanting to explore like my femininity, but then I was like in that fear of judgment, because I've for so long was had this identity, and then you want to explore this new identity and there's all this judgment that you're only creating for you, right? But the thing was that people did make a big deal. Like if I straightened my hair, it was like, oh my God, like, or like a friend of mine gave me like a makeover and it was like, oh my, became a
Yeah.
big deal because it was so foreign, right? And I guess everyone was waiting for me to step into that. But at
Yeah.
the same time, it just didn't happen until I think there was a self-esteem, 100% self-esteem issue there in terms with judgment and stuff like that.
Well, when you say, like you said, one of the words that you used was that you want it to be accepted, and that's why you didn't necessarily respond to whatever was intuitive. Like you want it to be part of the boys, the group, and
Mhm.
but I don't think we recognize that enough in the boys. Like they are more cautious about doing anything that steps outside of the lines you're supposed to paint in. Um, to show any vulnerability, to show any weakness. Like they in order to be accepted by their peers, by their family, by society, they have to behave in a certain way. And so it's kind of like straitjacketing everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
And I
there's
think it's also what we put on ourselves from
mhm,
society because it's
yes.
not like my parents didn't like say, like, my mom was very nurturing,
Mhm,
and she
yep.
was like, it's okay to cry, it's okay to, feel your emotions and things like that. But again, I think also from society and from what we're seeing and experiencing, we come to and draw our own conclusions because we have a different perception of the world than other people. It's like every single person draws their own perception of the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
From your environment, from the way you're raised, all that stuff. And it forms beliefs. And
Yes.
then those beliefs are what you're thinking. Okay. And then it's what then you are showing to the world. And in your 20s, you're kind of stripping that away. You're kind of
Hmm.
coming into a whole new identity. You're challenging those beliefs. You're challenging that judgment, right?
Yep.
And for myself, I was becoming somebody with high self-esteem and self-worth. And the only way I was going to, and as I was becoming that person, that's when I was stripping everything I once was to have this new form of identity.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot there too. Okay, I'm going to switch it for a minute because there's another part of your experience so far that initially when you said that you had intentional kidnapping and you trained with a Navy SEAL, those things it was kind of like headline news. It's like, who is this person? How where did this all come from? And then I in my search I listened to you were on some podcast and you were talking about it. And so I started putting puzzle pieces together. And tell me if I'm right in, because I'm just trying to understand how does a person make these decisions? Like because when you know that, if those are some of the qualities that you want to instill in your child or your nephew, then when you're aware of it, when you've thought about it and brought it to the forefront, then you can decide, okay, do I want to pass this knowledge and experience on, or do I want to change it, or what? So uh, the first one was which came first, the kidnapping or the Navy SEAL?
I signed up for the kidnapping
Yeah.
and realized I was not going to make it. So I went to the Navy SEAL training to prepare for the kidnapping.
Okay. So the with the kidnapping, I loved the what I heard was the catalyst for that. And what I understood was that you were having a conversation. It was a frightening time in society at that particular point, especially. And you said it didn't sound like it sounded kind of offhandedly. You asked your mom if you thought you could handle being kidnapped, and she said no. And it sounded like that was the flame that was kind of, well, I'll show you kind of, mentality that almost like the challenge. That's the
Yeah,
challenge.
well, it was kind of like then I was like, well, I need to know, like, because again, it's a scary time. Like, let's prepare. Like that's how I think. I'm like, okay, like let's get ready and let's prepare. And it's funny though, because I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is so out of character for me. And I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. And I remember like going back home to my brothers, and we were all living in LA at the time. And I was like, look at this move I just did, choke me. And I'd have them like choke me and like do the move. And I'm like, and it wouldn't work. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not how they choked me. You got to choke me like this. And my
Yeah.
brother was like, is
Yeah.
that what you're going to tell the person that's choking you? No, no, no. Move a little bit to the left.
Mm.
And I was like, but it's not working. And he goes, yeah, because these self-defense courses are scams. They were like in a real situation. They're like, you can't do it now. Like in there, they're making you feel empowered. He goes, out here in the real world, you're up against me. He's like, you're gonna lose every time. I'm 6 feet tall. You're 5 foot. He's like, I am 3 times your size. He's like, there's no way you're gonna beat me with your little self-defense course. And I will say, like, I take self-defense right now. I'm going for my blue belt soon, but that means nothing. No, I go to my brothers. So I'm like, oh, check this out. Like, and I lose every time. And it makes me feel like so weak, like so weak. And yeah, so that's kind of what came out and how I even did that.
So how did it come about that you were able to do a training with a Navy SEAL?
I was researching a Navy SEAL because that was what was on my brain when I decided to sign up for the SEER program. That's what the kidnapping is called. It's called SEER, stands for Survival, Invasion, Resistance, Escape. And I couldn't find one. And I ended up finding this program that run by a Navy SEAL. It was a nonprofit called Team Eagle One. And I messaged him and I was like, I just paid for this civilian SEER program. And he's like, if you paid for that, like, I'm like, oh, can I come on down and just one day, just want to try it out? He's like, if you're crazy enough to do that, like, I got to meet you. Come on down. So that's how it kind of started. And it was supposed to be one day of training, just one day. And then it like changed my life that one day. And I asked to join. I was like, can I just continue with you guys? And he could have said no, because it's a free program, it's a nonprofit. But he said, we'd love to have you. And that's how I ended up in the program.
So why did it have such a big impact on you?
It taught me so many lessons that I really think that people could teach you, say things to you, but until you really experience it, do you really sometimes understand it?
Mm.
And I've been an athlete my whole entire life, but teamwork, I feel like I didn't really understand until the Navy SEAL program.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I experienced, like, we were Tuesday, like almost 8 o'clock at night, Los Angeles, freezing cold outside. We're shivering. We were in the ocean, which was really cold. Now we're covered in sand, standing outside, shivering. And all I'm thinking about is me, how miserable I am, how much I want my nice warm bed, how much I want to quit this stupid program. Why am I even here? Like all these things. And then I turn to the person next to me and he's purple, purple. His teeth are chattering, all the hairs on his arms are standing up. He has goosebumps everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God, he's just as miserable as me. And then I stand closer to him and I put my arm up against his arm and I like coach him and like through my teeth because we're not supposed to be talking. And I'm like, just breathe in through your nose, you know? And as I'm coaching him to breathe and be present, and I put my arm against hit my arm against his arm, suddenly I stop thinking about me. Suddenly I'm not so cold and miserable. You know, I'm not thinking about the time and, you know, how it feels like it's forever and all this other negative stuff because I'm focused on my teammate. And suddenly I'm like, oh my God, I get it. Like your teammate next to you is more important than you. Instead of focusing on you and your misery and your victim mode, go help other people. When you go help other people, you stop thinking about you, you know, and all that negativity that you're feeling in this low point in your life, right? So that's how I learned
Can I
teammate
just
lessons.
ask you quickly because I just had the image, like the message that we constantly get is, you know, put on your own mask first. Like put on your own air mask first. You got to take care of yourself first before you can help others. But you're saying that with the Navy SEALs, it's the exact opposite. You take care of your buddy before you think about taking care of yourself. Is that
So
right?
I think two different situations. Like if the plane is going down, you got to put your oxygen mask on to help other people, you know. But yeah, in a sense of when you are in a low place in your life, when you are struggling, go help somebody. You
Mm.
know, go, it's going to help you to stop being a victim. It's also going to help you to maybe open up a new path. And, you know, because these lessons became book lessons in my children's book,
Hmm.
teamwork, belonging. You know, I was never going to fit in with these guys, 5 feet tall. I'm a female, you know, like so many things about me, 100 pounds soaking wet. There's so many things about me that was not going to change, right? But to make me fit in. But I'm always going to belong. And I think that's what I didn't understand as a child. I was always trying to fit in, right? If I had a choice to change my gender at that time, I would have chose it, no problem. Okay. I wanted to be one of the boys. My hair was cut like a boy. Okay. Like no joke. People
Yeah.
mistook me for one. I dressed just like one. You know, I wanted that because I wanted to fit in. I needed to fit in. I didn't understand that belonging and fitting in are two totally different things. I thought it was a synonym. It's a complete and it's opposite. But
Yeah.
we're not taught that because people don't understand that, right?
Mm.
And when I was 31, I was like, oh my God, if I would have known that fitting in and belonging are opposites, right? And belonging is showing up as your authentic self, knowing that you're enough, right?
Mm.
And you cannot fit in but still belong. I would have had a very different childhood. I might have stepped into my femininity at a younger age. You know, maybe not. We don't know, right? But the thing was, I was just trying so hard to fit in at such a young age in the environment that I was in because I wanted acceptance. And the thing was, it's not like nobody didn't accept me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like my brothers would turn their backs because I wanted to wear a dress that day, right?
Yeah.
But again, it was just my perception of my environment and my world and what I created in my mind from where I was raised, you know?
Yeah.
Because again, like children just absorb things without, like, there's a parent's intention is not to diminish their light. But sometimes we say things like if a child says things like, oh my God, I just did amazing at my baseball game. I'm the best, you know? And then the parent was like, well, we shouldn't be saying things like that. You're not the best, you know? Let's bring it down a little bit. That automatically, like the parent just has an intention of having the child not have a big ego. Like that's the intention, right?
Mhm.
We want to have the child have a low ego. But really, by saying that though, the child is taking that totally different. And the child is taking it that I need to diminish my light, I need to, and the thing is like, that is not what the parent meant, but that is what the child absorbed, right? And
So
the thing
yeah,
is like,
awareness is everything.
and everything. And the thing was that I absorbed a lot from what was around me that again, I needed to quote unquote fit in for thinking that I was going to belong that way. And that's what I learned in that program, which then launched my children's book. And now what I teach to people, children especially, because I think that that is the basis for everything.
Hmm. So did anything change in your understanding of what masculinity is as a result, like changed from when you were growing up to when you finished with the Navy SEAL?
I wouldn't say it changed anything in terms of um I'd say no, because like my perception in itself, no, because I've been around guys like this like my whole life. So for me, no, it didn't. But
Okay.
the lessons that I learned was what changed.
Yeah. So based, because you have a wealth of understanding and experiences with males, so a lot of females don't have. What would you say are some of the biggest emotional or mental challenges that men face today?
Well, I think you talked about in the beginning the testosterone that, is not talked about, and that emotional regulation that females have versus that males have, because we all have emotions. They just come at it at they're just different, and males tend to be more aggressive, right?
Hmm.
Um and they also can um move on from things a lot quicker and things like that. And I feel like that's not talked about a lot. Like, I think emotions in general for children is not taught and not discussed and is not trained. And I think that it's lacking in both genders. And I think
Hmm.
that I've learned it a lot, especially like me and my brother, we went to my mom was very, very big into us talking about emotions and us experiencing emotions and, letting things out when we need to let things out, not holding things in, where my dad was more like, hold it in. He
Yeah.
grew up in a household that he never had a conversation with his father. Like my
Yeah.
dad grew up in a household where his father was I would label abusive, and he was the head of the household that was, the disciplinarian, but
Yeah.
that you feared,
Yeah.
and you didn't get to have a conversation with. You didn't like, he never asked you about your day. You never asked him anything, and
Yeah.
that's what it
Yeah.
was like. Whereas then he raised his children more in an environment where they didn't fear you. He
Mm.
didn't like,
Yeah.
it was more of a, but he didn't know how to really communicate in terms of, he would ask you about your day or you can share things with him and he would talk to you, but emotions was not a specialty of his, and
Yeah.
he definitely was like, lock it up, but my mom, again, she grew up in a different environment, but I think that that's definitely a topic that is not taught. And if we're going to teach children things, I feel like that we need to start there.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think's the biggest misconception about masculinity?
I think the biggest misconception about masculinity today is toxic masculinity. I think that we are misconstruing toxic masculinity because we need masculine men. Like society functions with strong men. Strong men help carry society. Weak men collapse society. And I think that we are labeling toxic men, like as a negative, because we don't understand them. we don't understand exactly what that is. We're labeling it as arrogant. We're labeling him as egotistical. We're labeling them as, the people that are holding us down versus seeing it masculinity as strong men that respect people, that are disciplined,
So you're talking about healthy masculinity.
healthy masculinity. Yeah, healthy masculinity. But I feel like in society, we are just taking masculinity as a whole and 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 trying to strip it away from society, in terms of not wanting strong, disciplined men. And I think that we need that, we need men to function in society, to
So
help us in society.
so it's really the whole concept of, there are, well, there are at least two genders, but traditionally there are two genders,
Yes.
and both genders have challenges and gifts. And I don't think either gender is really completely understanding the gifts and the challenges of each other. And so when you talk about a strong masculinity or strong males, I think we all need to have that strength. And I don't think we're just talking about physical strength. I think we need healthy women who, you know, have an awareness of their own self, and also men. And I think men also need to have that strength of understanding the restraints that society puts on them, and then I mean, there is a movement that is, making a difference in the current generation, but like taking steps to advocate for themselves. So I think there's a lot of work to do with both genders, but I really think it's all about recognizing, yeah, we're different. Like we're
Yes.
not the same, and we can't treat each other the same. We need to be aware, we need to be respectful, and we need to kind of support and grow together, like in my opinion.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I think the thing too is, like, we talked about this earlier, when we talk about aggression and testosterone and, and control and things like that. They say, like, uh a calm person is a dangerous person. If you can be completely calm and have your emotions under control, right? You are you're more dangerous to society in terms of, like, you someone that is out of control, like they can't
Mhm.
control themselves is 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 very harmful,
Yep.
but what I'm trying to say is, like a dangerous man is someone that has it under control, but knows when to use it, when to come out to be that protector, to be that aggressor. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's what I want. Like, I want somebody that is a kind, caring, patient man, but I want a man is that can be aggressive when needs to be. Like, if I need protection from somebody, can step in and help me. Doesn't mean I can't help myself. I mean,
Mhm.
I've put myself in situations where I can handle my own, right? And, like, I think one of the things for me as a female is the biggest thing for me was learning how to control my emotions. And I think that once I was able to get those emotions under control and understand them, it made me more, I guess, I don't know if, like, dangerous is the best word, but, like, it just it made me more of an asset to myself and those around
Mhm.
me. And I think that, again, it all plays a part in, you know, control. Like men tend to be naturally more aggressive. That doesn't mean that it's bad. It just needs to be channeled properly, and like physical, they like to run around. I mean, women too, we like to do physical stuff, but men in general, they tend more towards
Yep.
physical, right? Running and
Yep.
all that stuff, right? That teaches self-discipline, that teaches control, that teaches respect, all these things, because um, that's you need someone that is trained in that discipline and that chooses peace but can act when needed, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, it does.
So it's
It
like
does.
they have their aggression under control, but when it comes out, like it can come out, and they can protect, they can lead, they can take responsibility. I think that that is extremely important, and that's what we need to teach in terms of we need to figure it out for ourselves, on what that works for and what that looks like for who we are. And then we could emulate that and then teach that. Because another thing too is like, how can you teach somebody about control when you don't even have control, right?
Well, that's just it. All of this, everything that you're saying, I think the first step for everybody, regardless of what gender you are, is becoming aware.
Right.
And without that, there's nothing you can do. And then once you're aware, then you start to learn a little bit more. And then once you've learned more, you start sharing that with the other people and start modeling it so that it becomes more of what is considered to be normal behavior, normal characteristics, rather than the stereotype of something that's not authentic. Listen,
Right.
I know, Gina, that I could probably talk to you for hours, but I'm trying to be kind of mindful also of your time because I know that you're a busy lady, but you're fascinating. And one of the things I really enjoyed about this was being able to speak to someone in your generation who is looking at it through a different lens. So, based on your experience, based on where you are in your life now, the connections you have with males, including your nephew. So, I think like it has been a very good conversation, and I'm really grateful for that. One of the questions that I ask people towards the end is, I will ask you now. So, picture yourself with your nephew further down the road, where he is just getting ready to welcome a little baby boy into his family. What words of wisdom would you give him about bringing that little boy into his world?
Oh gosh. Wow. Um, I would just really hope that whatever we teach him, he learns from and brings into his child's life, in terms of um raising a disciplined, strong, and capable man. I think that's really what it comes down to. Allow your boy to be a boy, to be curious, to be rough, to be adventurous, to take risks while also learning about responsibility and self-control,
And compassion and empathy.
compassion. I think that having all of those things, you're gonna help our society, grow in a very, very good way, So
Yeah.
that's what I'd hope he'd get from raising his child.
Well, before we kind of finish off, I would think that one of the things that you could do to make this next generation, or the current generation more understanding is sharing what you understand with other women, because we are the ones that bring new life into the world. We are the ones who are our little boys' first role models. We set the
Yeah,
the
yeah,
foundation. And so the more understanding we have of males for whatever perception, we create ourselves, I think it's really important. So, but before we finish
yeah.
today, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had of?
No, I mean, I think it was a really great conversation. I think it could have kept on going in terms of,
Absolutely.
especially in terms of the raising men and boys and stuff, because I think women do, like you just said, we have a huge part in raising strong men, right? And we have a very important role in society, and that it's important to talk about, because again, we are not the same. A male is not the same as a female. We have our differences. it's just in our DNA. Yeah, we cross, in terms of things, but we are different. And I think that we come at it from a different view. And there's so much to be explored and to be discussed. But I'm really glad I had the opportunity with you.
Well, thank you. You've been a great guest, and yes, I could talk for a long time with you. Can you tell the listeners where they can connect with you and kind of what you're doing right now? Like I know about your past stuff, but I don't really know what you're doing now as far as anything more than your podcast with the SEALs, which is quite fascinating, those episodes.
Yeah, I have a special forces podcast. We have a bunch of special forces on the show. It teaches mental toughness, resilience, all that stuff. It's called Mindset Lessons from the Field. You can get in touch with me, GinaCasazza.com. I am a children's author and I'm a speaker. I speak to adults at conferences, events, personal development courses, corporations, things like that. So GinaCasazza.com and my podcast, Mindset Lessons from the Field.
Well, thank you again. I know how busy life gets, and I hope you feel that I've honored your time today.
Oh, yeah, it was great. Great conversation.
It's really been a pleasure to talk with you. And I am sure, without any doubt, that people who listen to this will take some important nuggets out of it and just think a little bit deeper about, males and females. So I will make sure that I put all of the links in the show notes for people to please check out. And especially the podcast, I did listen to several episodes and really enjoyed them. So
Thank you.
for the audience, go there. So, thank you to our listeners for joining us on Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and tune in to the next conversation about raising boys. Thank you, Gina. If you're a parent raising a boy in today's complex world, be sure to explore sonhoodcoaching.com. You'll discover expert guidance and support designed to help you unlock your full parenting potential. As Amelia Gambetti says, this job is too difficult and too beautiful to do alone. Together we can explore this adventure and discover the magic of raising boys.